I trusted my friend with $5,000 when he needed help. He promised to pay me back. Then I found out he was spending thousands on vacations, watches, and a brand new car, while pretending to be broke. I never thought I'd be the person writing one of these posts, but here we are. I'm pissed. No, I'm beyond pissed. I feel stupid, betrayed, and like I've been played for a complete fool. I need to get this off my chest because I've spent months trying to be patient, understanding, and giving my so-called friend the benefit of the doubt. But at this point, I feel like an idiot for ever trusting him in the first place. So here's what happened. A few months ago, my friend, let's call him Jake, was in a really bad spot financially. He was behind on rent, struggling with bills, and constantly stressed about money. I've known Jake for years. We grew up together, went to the same college, and even had a brief phase where we were practically inseparable. I always saw him as one of the few genuinely good people in my life. So when he came to me, clearly desperate, I didn't even hesitate to help him. He told me he just needed a little bit of cash to get by. You know, just something to cover rent and utilities while he figured things out. I could see how stressed he was. He even said he was considering moving back in with his parents if things didn't turn around soon. And let's be real, no one in their late 20s wants to move back home unless they have absolutely no choice. So, I loaned him $5,000. I had some savings set aside for emergencies, and while it wasn't money I could just throw away, I figured Jake was good for it. He promised me he'd pay me back as soon as he could, and I believed him. He even reassured me over and over, saying he just needed a few months to get back on his feet. Bro, I swear, you'll get every dollar back. Those were his exact words. Fast forward 6 months. Do you think I've seen a single cent of that money? Not a chance. At first, I gave him some space. I didn't want to pressure him because, well, I know how tough financial struggles can be. I didn't want to be the asshole hounding him for money while he was barely scraping by. But every time I casually checked in, it was the same rehearsed excuse. Things are still tight, man. Next month for sure, I swear. I just need a little more time. And like a fool, I believed him. It wasn't like he was out partying every weekend or showing off expensive purchases, at least, not at first. If anything, I felt bad for him. I saw him struggling and thought, yeah, I get it. Life sucks sometimes. I figured he was just trying to keep his head above water. Then, last weekend happened. I was out running errands when I saw a brand new, shiny black Dodge Charger pull into the parking lot. The thing was clean. Custom rims, tinted windows, everything. It was the kind of car that makes people stop and stare. And guess who stepped out of the driver's seat, grinning like he just won the lottery? Jake. For a second, I thought I was seeing things. There was no way Jake, the same Jake who couldn't pay his rent 6 months ago, the same Jake who swore he'd pay me back next month for half a year, was stepping out of a brand new Dodge Charger like he just hit the jackpot. I literally stood there, frozen, watching him as he locked the car with the key fob and strutted toward the store like he had zero worries in the world. The cherry on top? He was on the phone, laughing his ass off about something. I wasn't even mad at first. I was just shocked. My brain couldn't process it. Like how? How? This man owed me $5,000. Money I wasn't even sure I was ever going to see again. And here he was, flexing a damn muscle car like he just hit the big leagues. I walked straight up to him. He was mid-conversation when he saw me, and the second his eyes met mine, I swear to God, he hesitated. Just for a split second. It was like he saw a ghost. Then, just like that, he smiled like everything was cool. Bro, what's up, man? He said, as if I wasn't the guy he had been dodging for 6 months. I wasn't about to cause a scene in the middle of a parking lot, so I just cut straight to the point. Nice car, Jake, I said, keeping my voice even. Guess things are going pretty well for you now, huh? And do you know what this guy had the audacity to say? He laughed. He actually laughed like this was some kind of joke. Oh man, you already know. Gotta treat yourself sometimes, right? I swear I saw red. Right? So, when am I getting my $5,000 back? Boom. His face changed immediately, like someone had flipped a switch. The fake smile dropped, and suddenly, he wasn't so excited to see me anymore. Dude, man, you know things have been tough, he started, rubbing the back of his neck. This isn't even what it looks like. I cut him off. It looks like you just bought a brand new car while still owing me $5,000. He started stammering. Nah, man, I didn't buy it. I just got a good deal on a lease. A fucking lease. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So let me get this straight, I said, keeping my voice calm even though I wanted to lose my shit. You don't have the money to pay me back, but you somehow had enough to sign a lease on a brand new Charger? More stammering. More bullshit excuses. More bro, it's complicated, and you know I got you nonsense. I just stood there, staring at him, trying to understand how I ever trusted this guy. That's when I noticed something else. The watch. Jake never used to wear watches, but now, suddenly, he had a gold Rolex sitting on his wrist like he was a damn CEO. I was done. I just turned around and started walking away because if I stood there for another second, I was going to do something I'd regret. Wait, bro, he called after me, but I didn't even turn around. I just got in my car and left. I don't even remember the drive home. I knew I should have seen this coming. Jake had always been that guy. You know the type, big dreams, no follow-through. Always talking about his next big move, always acting like he was on the verge of something huge. But when it came time to actually do the work, he'd flake. Every single time. But I thought this was different. This wasn't just some dumb get-rich-quick scheme he was hyping up. This was real money, my money, and he had no problem taking it, swearing up and down he'd pay it back, only to turn around and lease a luxury car like it was nothing. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my blood was boiling. I should have texted him, called him, maybe even showed up at his place. But I didn't. Instead, I grabbed my phone and went straight to Instagram. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe a couple of pictures, a story or two, but what I saw made my stomach turn. Jake wasn't just out here living his best life. He was flaunting it. Post after post of him flexing. There was a photo of him next to the Charger, captioned, "Hard work pays off. Dream car, secured. Let's get this money." There was another picture of him at a steakhouse, grinning at the camera with a massive ribeye in front of him. The kind of place where one meal costs more than some people's entire grocery budget for the month. Grind now, feast later. You gotta reward yourself for the hustle. Excuse me? Grind now, feast later? What grind? What hustle? The only reason he was able to afford any of this was because he had people like me, actual friends who gave a shit about him, spotting him when he was struggling. I kept scrolling, and it only got worse. Photos from a weekend trip to Miami. Bottle service. A rooftop pool. Him at a high-end sneaker store. I felt physically sick. This wasn't a guy who was barely scraping by. This was a guy who never planned on paying me back in the first place. And that realization hit me like a truck. Because I wasn't just mad about the money anymore. I was mad because I actually cared. I cared when he told me he was struggling. I cared when he said he was scared about making rent. I cared enough to take my hard-earned money and hand it over because I believed him. Because I thought he was my friend. And now? Now I just felt like a complete idiot. I threw my phone onto my bed and just sat there, staring at the floor, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. I could confront him again, demand my money back. But what would that even do? He'd just hit me with more excuses, more lies. I could put him on blast, expose him for the fraud he was. But would that even get me my money? For the first time in months, I had to face the truth. Jake wasn't avoiding paying me back. Jake never planned to pay me back at all. By the next morning, my frustration hadn't faded. I had given Jake the benefit of the doubt for months, assuming he was struggling, assuming he just needed time. But after seeing how he was living, it was clear that I had been nothing more than an easy source of cash to him. I decided to confront him directly. I sent him a message first thing, telling him we needed to talk. He took hours to respond, and when he did, it was exactly what I expected. He was suddenly too busy to have a conversation. That alone told me everything I needed to know. He had time for everything else in his life. New purchases, vacations, nights out. But the moment it came to repaying a debt, he became impossible to reach. I didn't bother with small talk or pretending to be patient. I told him, straight up, that I wanted my money back. No more waiting, no more delays. His response came slower this time, as if he was carefully crafting his excuse. He said he understood, but things were still tight, and he just needed a little more time. It was absurd. The same man who had been flaunting a new lifestyle, the same man who had just gotten a car and expensive watches and had been posting pictures from Miami, now expected me to believe that he was somehow still struggling financially. I refused to let him twist the situation anymore. He was just choosing not to pay me back because he didn't feel like it. I reminded him, as plainly as I could, that I had loaned him the money when he needed it most. I had trusted him, assuming that, as a friend, he would respect me enough to follow through on his word. And yet here I was, chasing after my own money while he ignored me. For a long time, he didn't respond, and that silence infuriated me even more. I wasn't going to let him pretend this wasn't happening. I took my frustration straight to his Instagram. Under his latest post, the one where he had proudly posed next to his new car, I left a comment pointing out that if he had money for luxury purchases, he should have money to start paying me back. That got his attention immediately. Within minutes, the entire post was deleted, as if removing it could erase the problem. And then, my phone rang. Suddenly, He had time to talk. His tone was defensive right away, as if I was the one in the wrong for calling him out publicly. He didn't like that people could see what he had been avoiding. He said I was making it seem like he wasn't going to pay me back, as if I had somehow misunderstood the situation. But I wasn't imagining his spending habits or making up the fact that I had been waiting 6 months with nothing to show for it. He insisted he wasn't in a position to pay the full amount yet, but he could send me something soon. I told him that was fine. If he was serious, I wanted to see at least a couple $100 by the end of the week, and I expected regular payments after that. He reluctantly agreed, but I knew better than to believe it. His pattern was obvious by now: stall, delay, make excuses, and hope I'd forget about it. But I wasn't forgetting. I was done being patient. By Friday morning, I already knew what was coming. I had set the deadline, told Jake I expected something, anything, by the end of the week, but I didn't bother getting my hopes up. Still, I checked my account as soon as I woke up. Nothing. I waited, thinking maybe he was planning to send it later in the day. Maybe he just hadn't gotten around to it yet. But as the hours passed and my phone stayed silent, it became clear that he was pulling the same stunt again. I texted him a simple question: "Where's the $200? It took him 3 hours to respond, and when he did, it was just another excuse. Something came up, he said, but he'd have the money for me next week. No details, no apology, just another delay, as if I was supposed to take it and move on like always. I asked him what exactly had come up. No answer. I sent another message. Still nothing. At that point, I already knew he was ignoring me, but I checked his Instagram anyway, just to confirm what I suspected. And there it was. A brand new story, posted an hour ago. A boomerang of him at a rooftop bar, drink in hand, looking completely unbothered. The caption? "Friday vibes, cocktail glass money bag." I had to put my phone down for a second because the sheer audacity of it was unbelievable. He had money for drinks, money for whatever lifestyle he was trying to project online, but not a single dime for the person who had kept him afloat when he needed it most. I took a screenshot of the post and sent it to him. No words, just the image. Left on read. I called him. No answer. Called again. I hated the idea of begging someone to do the right thing, especially someone I had once considered a close friend. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about respect. So I decided to hit him where I knew it would hurt. I went to his latest Instagram post, one of those obnoxious dinner pictures where he was flexing a plate of overpriced steak, and left a comment. "Glad to see you eating good. Any update on that $5,000? It took him less than 20 minutes to delete the entire post. That was when I realized something important. Jake didn't care about me, but he cared about his image. He cared about looking successful, about keeping up appearances. The moment I threatened that, he panicked. And if public embarrassment was the only way to make him take this seriously, then I was just getting started. After Jake deleted his post, I expected him to text me. Maybe to argue, maybe to give me more excuses, but at the very least to acknowledge that he had seen my comment. Instead, he did what he always did. He ignored me, probably hoping I'd let it go. I wasn't letting it go. At this point, I wasn't just some guy chasing a debt. I was someone who had been lied to, manipulated, and dismissed, and I was done playing by Jake's rules. He had no problem avoiding me when I reached out privately, but the second I made it public, he panicked. That told me everything I needed to know. So, I took it a step further. I went through his profile, scrolling past months of flashy posts. Luxury cars, expensive meals, weekend getaways, all the things he apparently had money for while claiming he was struggling. Every post was carefully crafted to show the world how successful he was. I picked another one, a picture of him at the airport, boarding a flight to Miami, posted just a few weeks ago. Underneath, I left another comment. "Hope Miami was worth it. Any update on that money you owe me?" Once again, the post disappeared within the hour. At that moment, I knew I had him. Jake wasn't just ignoring me out of laziness. He wasn't paying me back because, in his mind, I had already been written off. He had convinced himself that I'd eventually stop asking, that I'd get embarrassed chasing after him and let it go. That realization pissed me off more than anything else. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about principle. About the fact that someone I had trusted had used me, laughed behind my back, and then gone on living his life like I didn't even exist. I didn't need the full $5,000 back in one day. I just needed proof that he actually intended to pay me. So I sent one final message: no pleasantries, no patience. If I don't get a payment by tomorrow, I start tagging you in every single post you've made flexing with money that isn't yours. Your call. It took less than 2 minutes for him to reply. "Dude, chill. I'll send something tonight." That was the fastest response I had gotten from him in months. Suddenly, he wasn't too busy. Suddenly, he didn't need another week. By midnight, I got a notification. A transfer of $500. Not the full amount, but way more than the $200 he had promised and failed to send earlier. He could have been paying me all along. He just didn't want to. That was fine, because now, he had no choice. Seeing the $500 deposit hit my account should have felt like a victory, but all it did was confirm what I already knew. Jake had the money this entire time. He wasn't struggling, he wasn't in some impossible financial situation, and he wasn't doing his best to make things right. He had just assumed I'd get tired of asking and let it go. Now that he realized I wasn't backing down, suddenly he could send a payment. And not just the bare minimum excuse of $200 he had promised before, but $500. Just like that. It wasn't enough, though. I wasn't stupid. This was just damage control on his part. An attempt to shut me up without fully dealing with the situation. He probably thought that if he sent a little now, I'd lay off for a while and he could go back to ignoring me. I wasn't letting that happen. The next morning, I sent him a message. Got the $500. When's the next payment? No response. I waited a few hours, then sent another. I gave him until the evening before I decided to remind him again. This time, in public. He had posted another Instagram story, some gym selfie captioned, "Hustle never stops, flexed biceps." I didn't even hesitate. I replied directly to it, "Hustle hard enough to send the rest of my money?" This time, he answered immediately, "Chill, bro. I told you I got you." I wasn't in the mood for another cycle of his nonsense. Then prove it. When's the next payment? He hit me with a soon. Bro, relax. Relax? This man owed me thousands of dollars and had ignored me for 6 months, and now he was acting like I was the one being unreasonable? I told him straight. I wasn't backing off until I had every last cent. He tried to play it cool, but I could tell he was getting uncomfortable. The moment I brought up the option of making our situation even more public, his whole attitude changed. Suddenly, he was saying he'd try to send more next week if I just stopped making a big deal about it. That confirmed something else for me. He cared way more about looking good than actually doing good. If he had truly been struggling, if this had been about bad luck or circumstances outside his control, I would have understood. But no, he had no problem spending money when it was for himself. The only time he was broke was when it came to paying back someone who had helped him. That night, I checked my account one last time before going to bed. No new deposit. Not that I expected one, but I had made one thing clear to Jake. He wasn't getting rid of me that easily. And if I had to keep making him uncomfortable to get my money back, I was more than willing to do that. I gave Jake the weekend to come through with another payment, just to see if, for once, he'd keep his word without me having to chase him. Predictably, I woke up Monday morning to exactly what I expected. Nothing. I sent him a text, keeping it short. "Any update?" No response. I waited a few hours before trying again. "Dude, seriously? When's the next payment?" Still nothing. I checked his social media, and of course, there he was, active as ever. A fresh post, another flex. This time, it was a photo of a brand new pair of sneakers. The caption some nonsense about investing in yourself. The irony nearly made me laugh. I commented under his post, "Nice kicks. Did my money pay for those?" This time, it only took 10 minutes for the entire post to disappear. And then, just as expected, my phone finally buzzed. Jake was pissed. "Bro, why are you doing this? You're making me look bad." I had to stop myself from laughing out loud. That was his concern. Not the fact that he still owed me thousands of dollars. Just that I was making him look bad. I told him flat out. "Then pay me what you owe, and I'll stop." For a second, I thought he'd argue, but apparently, he was too flustered to even try. Instead, he just hit me with "I'll send something tomorrow." I wasn't going to hold my breath, but I made it clear I expected a payment, and if it didn't happen, I'd keep reminding him however I had to. The next day, I checked my account first thing in the morning, and sure enough, there it was, another $750. Not everything, but progress. And just like last time, the second he paid, he immediately texted me to tell me to chill and stop commenting on his posts. I didn't reply. I just smiled, because now I had the perfect way to make sure I got the rest of my money. Jake had just made it clear he didn't care about my messages, my frustration, or even the debt itself. But the second I publicly called him out, he folded. And I still had plenty of ways to keep the pressure on. After the second payment, I decided to test something. I backed off for a few days. No texts, no comments, no pressure. I wanted to see if Jake would take it upon himself to continue paying me without being forced into it. I already knew the answer, but I figured I'd at least give him a chance to prove me wrong. He didn't. A full week passed, and nothing. No new deposits, no messages from him. It was as if, in his mind, he had done enough and could move on. Meanwhile, he was back to posting his usual flexes, another night out, another meal at some expensive restaurant, another reminder that he had money when it suited him. At this point, I wasn't even mad anymore. I was just exhausted by the sheer entitlement. He wasn't embarrassed about owing me money. He was only embarrassed when I made sure other people knew he did. So, I reminded him. He had just posted a picture of a concert, VIP seats, expensive drinks, the whole deal. The caption was some nonsense about living your best life. I commented, "Crazy how you can afford VIP but still owe me $3,750. When's the next payment?" And just like before, my phone buzzed immediately. I cut him off and told him straight. He had one more week. If I didn't see another payment by then, I'd stop being polite about it. I'd make sure everyone in his circle knew exactly who he was and what he had done. That finally got through to him. The next day, another $1,000 hit my account. I was finally making progress, but it was pathetic that it had to come to this. Instead of doing the right thing like a decent person, Jake was treating this like a game of social damage control. He wasn't paying me back because it was the right thing to do. He was paying me back because he was scared of looking bad. And I was more than willing to use that to my advantage. With every payment, the pressure only got stronger. And whether he liked it or not, Jake was running out of time. The moment Jake sent that $1,000, I knew he was starting to panic. His payments were getting bigger, coming faster, but it wasn't out of guilt. It was because he knew I wasn't letting this go. I gave him one last deadline. I told him that if I didn't get the remaining balance by the end of the month, I was done playing nice. No more quiet texts, no more private reminders. I'd make sure every single person he was trying to impress knew the truth. I didn't even have to say it outright. He knew exactly what I meant. A few days later, he sent another $1,500. Suddenly, the guy who needed more time was pulling money out of thin air. Suddenly, he was capable of making real payments. And suddenly, I was only $1,250 away from finally being done with him. I didn't message him after that. I wanted to see if, after everything, he'd finish paying me back on his own. Maybe, just maybe, he'd take responsibility without me having to chase him for the last bit. He didn't. I gave him 2 weeks and nothing came. At that point, I wasn't even surprised. He was consistent, if nothing else. Consistent in being unreliable, in dodging responsibility, in assuming I'd eventually drop it. So, I reminded him. He had posted another picture, this time at a golf course, bragging about some business moves he was working on. It was laughable. I didn't even leave a comment this time. I just sent him a direct message. If you can afford golf, you can afford the last $1,250. Pay up. This time, there was no argument. No excuses. No attempts at brushing me off. 2 hours later, I got the notification, a full deposit, clearing his debt completely. And just like that, after months of frustration, dodging, and games, it was finally over. Jake didn't say a word after that. No apology, no explanation, nothing. Just silence. And honestly, I preferred it that way. I blocked him the next morning. I realized something throughout all of this. It wasn't just about money. It was about who Jake really was. Someone who could take advantage of a friend, someone who could lie to their face, someone who only cared about doing the right thing when it benefited them. I didn't lose $5,000 in this situation. I lost a friend. But in the end, I think I came out ahead.